If India's pharmaceutical industry stopped operating tomorrow, the consequences would be felt within weeks in hospitals across 191 countries. India produces 20% of all the world's generic medicines by volume. India produces 60% of the world's vaccines. India supplies 60% of all vaccines procured by UNICEF for the world's children. One country, one industry, keeping the world alive.
India produces approximately 90% of the WHO's global demand for measles vaccines. India meets 40 to 70% of global demand for DPT vaccines, the shots that protect children from diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough. India's pharmaceutical exports reached a record $30.5 billion in FY 2024-25, growing 9.4% in a single year. Those exports reach 191 countries, with approximately 50% going to the world's most stringent regulated markets, including the United States and Europe. This is not a developing country exporting cheap products. This is the world's largest supplier of quality certified medicines, supplying the most demanding markets on Earth.
The single most important pharmaceutical institution on Earth that most people have never heard of is located in Pune, Maharashtra. The Serum Institute of India, SII, is the world's largest vaccine manufacturer by volume, producing over 1.5 billion doses of various vaccines every year. During COVID, SII produced billions of Covishield doses, the AstraZeneca vaccine manufactured under license, and exported them to over 90 countries. A large share of COVAX doses administered across Africa, Asia, and Latin America during the pandemic came from this one facility in Pune. Without the Serum Institute, the world's COVID vaccination program would have reached billions fewer people, and the pandemic would have lasted years longer.
If Pune is the home of the world's vaccine champion, Hyderabad is the city that produces 1/3 of the entire world's vaccines. Hyderabad's pharmaceutical ecosystem is unlike anything else in Asia. Over 800 pharmaceutical and life sciences companies operate in and around the city. Telangana state, with Hyderabad at its center, accounts for approximately 1/3 of India's pharmaceutical production and nearly 1/5 of India's pharma exports. Genome Valley, a 2,000-acre life sciences cluster outside Hyderabad, hosts over 200 biotech and pharma companies from 18 countries. Novartis, GSK, Sanofi, Eli Lilly, Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Roche all have major operations in Hyderabad, with Novartis operating its largest facility outside its home city of Basel.
The second pillar of India's pharmaceutical power, after vaccines, is generic medicines. A generic medicine is a bioequivalent version of a branded drug that becomes available after the original patent expires. Generic medicines deliver the same therapeutic effect as the branded drug at 50 to 80% lower cost. India dominates global generics production because of large-scale manufacturing, exceptional process engineering, and a workforce of hundreds of thousands of skilled chemists, pharmacists, and engineers. The Patents Act of 1970, which allowed process patents but not product patents, gave Indian companies the freedom to develop low-cost manufacturing processes for essential drugs, creating the industrial foundation that today supplies the world.
The most powerful demonstration of what Indian generic medicines mean for the world is the HIV/AIDS crisis in Africa. In the early 2000s, HIV antiretroviral drugs in Western markets cost between $10,000 and $15,000 per patient per year, a price that made treatment impossible for the vast majority of infected people in Africa. Indian companies, led by Cipla, began producing generic antiretrovirals for under $300 per patient per year. The price of HIV treatment fell by more than 95%. Programs supported by the Global Fund, PEPFAR and the UN were able to scale treatment to millions of patients across Africa who would otherwise have died without access. Today, an estimated 40 million people living with HIV globally depend on affordable antiretroviral treatment, the majority of it manufactured in India. India did not just supply medicines to Africa. India saved a generation.
The quality of Indian pharmaceutical manufacturing is not a claim. It is a verified fact, certified by the world's most demanding regulators. India has more US FDA-approved pharmaceutical manufacturing plants than any country outside the United States itself, with over 700 US FDA-approved facilities as of 2025-26. India also has over 2,050 WHO Good Manufacturing Practice certified facilities. In March 2026, approximately half of all generic drug approvals and tentative approvals issued by the US FDA came from Indian companies, with over 25 Indian firms winning approvals in a single month. Indian companies secured over 600 US generic drug approvals in just the first 10 months of FY 2024-25. This is not a country that makes cheap imitations. This is the world's most productive, certified pharmaceutical manufacturing ecosystem.
The companies driving India's pharmaceutical dominance are a generation of global businesses built from Indian soil. Sun Pharma, one of India's largest pharmaceutical companies, operates across cardiovascular, neurology, oncology, and other therapies, with a major global generics presence in the United States and Europe. Cipla is known globally for its affordable HIV medicines and respiratory therapies, and remains a primary supplier of antiretrovirals to African healthcare programs. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories in Hyderabad has a strong biosimilars and generics business serving the US and European markets with deep local R&D capability. Biocon, India's leading biotechnology company, manufactures biosimilar insulins and oncology antibodies for regulated markets across the world. These are not small companies. These are global pharmaceutical corporations headquartered in India that supply the healthcare systems of the United States, Europe, and the developing world simultaneously.
India's pharmaceutical exports have grown from approximately $1.9 billion in 2001 to $30.5 billion in 2024-25. That is a 16-fold increase in 25 years. The United States is the largest single market, absorbing approximately 34% of India's pharmaceutical exports. The European Union absorbs approximately 19%, with France, the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium as key destinations. Africa is a major and growing market, with Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya as primary destinations, receiving both generic medicines and vaccines. The industry and government project Indian pharmaceutical exports will continue growing at double-digit rates as the sector moves into biosimilars, complex generics, and eventually novel drug discovery.
India's pharmaceutical story is extraordinary, but it has one significant vulnerability that the industry is urgently working to address. India still imports approximately 35% of its active pharmaceutical ingredient requirements, the core chemical components of medicines. Of those imports, approximately 74% come from China. For certain critical antibiotics, including cephalosporins, azithromycin, and penicillins, China accounts for 90 to 95% of global production. This means India's pharmaceutical export machine, which supplies the world with essential medicines, depends on a supply chain that runs through a strategic adversary. India's PLI scheme for bulk drugs has catalyzed over 4,800 crore rupees in new domestic API investment. But China's share of India's API imports has actually risen from 68% in FY 2021 to 74% in FY 2024-25. This is the honest challenge India must solve to complete its pharmaceutical independence.
India is not satisfied with being the world's pharmacy for generic medicines. The next phase is far more ambitious. India is moving into biosimilars, complex biological medicines derived from living cells that treat cancer, autoimmune conditions, and diabetes, where Biocon is already a global leader. India is investing in AI-enabled drug discovery, using artificial intelligence to identify new drug candidates faster and cheaper than traditional methods. India's government has set a target for the national bioeconomy to reach $300 billion by 2030. The same skills that enabled India to manufacture generics cheaply, chemistry expertise, engineering capability, and process innovation, are now being applied to developing entirely new drugs. India is not just trying to remain the world's pharmacy. India is trying to become the world's drug discoverer.
In 1947, India gained independence as a nation that could not feed itself and imported most of its medicines from abroad. The Patents Act of 1970 gave Indian companies the freedom to develop their own manufacturing processes. 50 years of patient industrial development followed. And today, India is the country that produces 60% of the world's vaccines, supplies 20% of all generic medicines globally, operates more US FDA-approved plants than any country outside America, saved a generation in Africa by making HIV treatment affordable, vaccinated a significant portion of the world during COVID, and is building the next generation of pharmaceutical innovation in Hyderabad, Pune, and Bangalore. India did not inherit this position. India built it, chemistry by chemistry, plant by plant, approval by approval. The world calls India the world's pharmacy. India is still just getting started.